If the truth is not here, then we've got to find an error in one of these statements. Again, they can't all be true. They can't coexist. Kushner, dealing with this difficulty, said, if I have to choose between God's goodness and God's power, I would rather limit his power than limit his goodness. That's an interesting statement. I can see where he's coming from. I can also feel the pain of a parent who thinks perhaps his child is forgotten by God and saying, that can't be, God is good. I can't accept anything other than God's goodness. Why doesn't God heal my child? He must be good. If he were omnipotent, he would cure him. Kushner was prepared, therefore, to say that the place we have to give a little bit in terms of truth of a statement is in number one. Then obviously, God is not all-powerful. What Kushner developed and what swept the United States in terms of a seemingly Jewish response was a limitation on God's power. And I must say to you that from the perspective of every Jewish theologian that I know of, that unfortunately is heresy. Simply put, God by definition is all-powerful. When God met Moses at the burning bush, and Moses asked God, if the people will turn to me to find out what is your name, what shall I tell them? Obviously, he wasn't just interested in a title. What he meant was, what is your essence? Tell me, how shall I explain Godship to the people? His response was, tell them, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Incorrectly translated, I am that I am. To me, that almost sounds like a Yiddishism. I am what I am. Don't ask me anymore. I am what I am. That doesn't deal with the question at hand. Tell me who you are. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh in Hebrew is a future tense. I will be what I will be, says Maimonides magnificently. Only God can say, I will be whatever I choose to be. I will be whatever I want to be. I can't say that, nor can you. I will be an airplane? I can't be an airplane. I will fly. I mean, I can fly within a plane, but I can't fly. There are things that I can't do. I'm limited by my humanity. God can say, I will be what I will be, and God is all-powerful, and therefore he can tell Moses before the Exodus, I can take the Jews out of Egypt. I can do anything. We don't need more proofs for that. That's built into the entire Bible. God is all-powerful, and so I reject Kushner's qualification of number one, even as I am now going to head to the first main correct answer by telling you he may have had it wrong by accepting a heretical approach of limitation of God's omnipotence, saying that God can't. But he put his finger on something that is true, and it may come as a great surprise to you. God, in fact, is limited in what he can do, but allow me to finish the sentence, because God chooses to place a limitation upon himself in a certain area. Let me explain. God gave a gift to the world. God gave people free will. That's a fundamental belief of Judaism. You are free to do whatever you want to do, and for that reason, you can be rewarded or punished. That's the essence of the Torah. See, I set before you this day life and goodness, death and evil. Choose life. Choose the correct path. Choose to do that which is good. When God gives free choice, people can do things that he doesn't want them to do. Do you understand? I'll clarify. Human beings can be as wicked as Haman. They can kill. They can murder. They can steal. Why do they have that right? Because if they were stopped every time they were to attempt to do something which is wrong, and God were to pull strings over their heads preventing them from committing a crime, then people would be puppets. Puppets. There's another word for what they might be. If people only did what they were supposed to do, hear me well, people would be angels. God has enough angels. Human beings are holier than angels. Do you know why human beings are holier than angels? If angels have no choice, then you can't really say, you're a good angel. I always tend to think to myself, you have an IBM machine. You don't say to the machine, you were a good machine today. It wasn't good, it just did what it was programmed to do. An angel is an IBM machine. IBM, ich bin ein Malach. I'm an angel. It is programmed to do what it does. Hence it is angelic, but it's not really good. Since a human being can be wicked, when he or she chooses not the path of wickedness, but the path of righteousness, then the person is to be applauded and can be rewarded. You didn't do that. You chose instead to do this. Watch this very carefully. In giving a human being the right and the ability to do things that God doesn't necessarily approve of, there can also obviously be consequences that God doesn't approve of as well. Does it mean that any time someone is murdered, God wanted him killed? Otherwise, God wouldn't have let him be killed. But wait a second, think that through. If a man takes a gun in his hands, picks it up and shoots another, that was a conscious free will act. There's a text in the Torah that makes clear what I'm saying to you, and I'd like you to be aware of it. The text says, in Mishpatim, in the Seder of Mishpatim, in Shemos, Exodus chapter 22, Makeish v'meis mos yimos. He who slays another person and kills him, he shall surely be put to death. The next phrase is, V'asher lo tzada, and if he didn't intend to do it, it wasn't intentional as a conscious act, Velokim ino liyodo, and God caused it to come to hand, and God caused it to happen as an accident because someone got on top of a ladder and fell down on another person, then there is galut, he goes into exile. But note, in which situation do we say, and God caused it to happen? Do we call it an act of God? In the situation where there was no conscious human choice involved, somebody didn't do it. Elokim ino liyodo, where it was an accident. But if it was a free choice act, then God didn't do it. What do you mean God didn't do it? Isn't God responsible for everything? Do you know that the first person to die in history was an innocent? Cain killed Hevel. Cain killed Abel. And that's because he was able to do so. That's because he had the ability to do so. But that doesn't mean that God wanted it to happen. There are midrashim which say the following, and think of how striking they are. I didn't understand them when I was a child, but I do understand them now. God cried when the temple was destroyed. God cried when somebody was killed. I imagine God cried during the Holocaust many times. We cried, God cried. There's no midrash for that only because of an anachronism. God cried. But how does one understand that statement? Why would God cry? Because God held his hands behind his back to maintain what principle? Free will. God has to lay off, because if God were to intervene every time somebody were to do something evil, then there would be no more free will. God chose free will as a supreme value. And in choosing free will as a right given to human beings, there are going to be consequences that are not always pleasing or desirable in the eyes of God. That's an unfortunate trade-off. It's a trade-off that God must, of necessity, accept. Interesting. God is bound by this reality. Give people free choice. They will do things that God doesn't, quote, want to happen. They happen because people do them of their own volition. God doesn't always intervene. Just as in a religious sense, if you will allow me an aside, people say, well, I used to think I can't eat a ham sandwich. God says so. I was afraid. And then I ate my first ham sandwich. I thought lightning would strike me dead. It didn't. Then obviously, it's not that significant. If God were to throw a bolt of lightning down every time somebody who was Jewish chose to eat at McDonald's, then, of course, nobody would violate the law of kashrut, but conversely, nobody would also fulfill the law of kashrut by opting as a free will decision to keep kosher. That's extremely significant. You might ask me, in that case, I'm limiting God. Well, I'm not really limiting him. God chose to limit himself. But it's not fair. What happens to people who are murdered, and God didn't want that to happen, but still God is good? Here I'd like to throw in one other major idea. It's extremely important in order to allow us to accept this analysis. Yes, there are people who can even die at the hands of a free will decision on the part of another human being. God is upset. You say it's not fair. You're absolutely right. And therefore God owes those souls something to make it up to them, and you can address that in one of two follow-ups, in one of two ways. Olam haba, world to come, is a reality, and God may well say, I didn't want you to die, I wanted you to live more and to earn a wonderful place in Olam haba. You didn't have that opportunity, but since you came here before you were decreed to come here, I will give you your share in the world to come nonetheless. I'll give you a wonderful place, a great seat, no matter what. Or if you're still not satisfied, perhaps this is one of the instances in which God utilizes something that Kabbalah and I think 90% of Jews believe in, I certainly believe in, and that is Gilgul Neshamot. You don't have to believe this to be a good Jew, but it is very prevalent in Jewish thought that there is recycling, that there is a return. A person can come back to earth for many different reasons. A person can come back to earth for tikkun hachet, for example, rectification of a sin. Kabbalah is daring enough to even identify certain individuals in terms of past life experience. For example, Mordechai dedicated his entire lifetime to not bowing down to Haman. That was his greatness. According to Kabbalah, Mordechai was the soul of Yaakov, Jacob, who was a perfect human being, except he bowed down to Esav. And that he shouldn't have done. And so he's given an opportunity to live again and to undo that one sin. I'm just giving you an illustration.